This week on Christian World News, America strikes Syria after a chemical weapons attack kills scores of people. The U.S. launches an attack on the regime of Bashar al-Assad. Plus, the case for Christ. He was a hardcore atheist, but when his wife became a Christian, it forced him to re-examine everything. And it's been called the most godless country in Europe and the graveyard for preachers. But this church planter in Iceland refuses to give up.
여러분 안녕하십니까? 크리스천 월드뉴스입니다. 도널드 트럼프 미 대통령이 시리아를 향해 경고의 메시지를 던졌습니다. 무고한 민간인들을 상대로 화학 무기를 사용한 시리아 정부를 더 이상 용인하지 않겠다고 밝힌 건데요. 다른 국가들의 동참도 요구했습니다. 일부 국가들이 지지를 선언한 가운데 러시아를 비롯한 일부 국가들은 미국을 비난하고 나섰습니다. 오늘의 첫 번째 소식입니다.
The U.S. launched 59 Tomahawk cruise missiles at Syria from 2 warships in response to its chemical weapons attack that killed dozens of civilians.
Tonight I ordered a targeted military strike on the airfield in Syria from where the chemical attack was launched.
President Trump at his Mar-a-Lago resort said there was no doubt Syrian President Bashar al-Assad was responsible for the use of illegal sarin gas against his own people. The president had been clearly affected by the pictures of suffering children from the deadly chemical strike.
Even beautiful babies were cruelly murdered in this very barbaric attack. No child of God should ever suffer such horror.
Officials say the missiles were aimed at the air base that was home to the warplanes that carried out the chemical attacks earlier this week, killing more than 70 people. The strike received both bipartisan support and criticism on Capitol Hill. Republican Senators John McCain and Lindsey Graham applauded the action. We salute the skill and professionalism of the U.S. Armed Forces who carried out tonight's strikes in Syria. Acting on the orders of their commander-in-chief, they have sent an important message the United States will no longer stand idly by as Assad, aided and abetted by Putin's Russia, slaughters innocent Syrians with chemical weapons and barrel bombs, the senators said. But Republican Senator Rand Paul tweeted, "While we all condemn the atrocities in Syria, the United States was not attacked." Some Democrats applauded the president's move, while others said he needs to consult with Congress on future military actions. The Kremlin is condemning the military strike, calling it aggression against a sovereign nation in violation of international law. Pentagon officials say Russia was informed before the attack. The president also said, "We ask for God's wisdom," and he said the world needs to work together to stop the bloody fighting in Syria.
Tonight I call on all civilized nations to join us in seeking to end the slaughter and bloodshed in Syria, and also to end terrorism of all kinds and all types.
Charlene Aaron, CBN News.
이와 관련해 게리 레인 수석 특파원과 좀 더 자세한 이야기 나눠보겠습니다.
Gary, thanks for being with us.
Glad to be here.
Well, the U.S. has now stepped directly into the Syrian civil war. What will be the fallout?
Well, I think there's already a fallout, obviously, for Bashar al-Assad, the president of Syria. He knows now that Donald Trump means business. So he'll be on his guard to make sure that he doesn't do anything that will, cause another strike like this. But I think also the fallout is from, of course, America's enemies or those who oppose the United States, Russia, Iran, of course. They denounced it. But America's allies are rallying behind what President Trump did, and there may be a coalition to put pressure to oust Assad or at least come to some agreement to end this 6-year war.
Now, President Trump used some very religious language in his speech. Let's take a listen.
Okay.
On Tuesday, Syrian dictator Bashar al-Assad launched a horrible chemical weapons attack on innocent civilians. No child of God should ever suffer such horror. We ask for God's wisdom as we face the challenge of our very troubled world. We pray for the lives of the wounded and for the souls of those who have passed. Good night, and God bless America and the entire world. Thank you.
Now, Gary, what do the use of these phrases tell us about President Trump?
Well, it's interesting, isn't it? Because he said no child of God should suffer this kind of fate. And basically that tells us that he really felt this. He saw those images. He said he saw those images, and they really touched him. And he felt a moral obligation to do something. This is probably based on his Judeo-Christian faith, which says that we just can't stand by and see the evil overcome light. I mean, light needs to overcome evil. So I think he really felt a moral responsibility to do something.
Well, speaking of light overcoming evil, Syria has an ancient church. It's thousands of years old. How is it doing in the midst of the war?
Not well at all. It's a crippled church. It really is. Many Christians have left. Those that have remained have seen their churches destroyed, many of their family members killed by ISIS and other militant groups. And but there is a remnant there that has remained. But they need our prayer.
And within that remnant, is the church able to have any impact to be a light in that darkness, especially during this time?
Jessica, there are some, and I know of at least one church up in Aleppo that remained, and they've been feeding people, not just Christians, but Muslims, housing them, providing clothing, and reaching out to them, also sharing the gospel with them. So that is positive. They believe that they can still be light in the midst of darkness.
Well, let's change topics quickly.
Sure.
Egypt's president recently met with President Trump in Washington. Egypt's Coptic Christians were very interested in that meeting. Tell us why.
Well, for two reasons. They wanted to see Trump do as Egypt has done and declare the Muslim Brotherhood a terrorist group. That did not happen, at least not yet. The other thing was they wanted to see pressure put on the Egyptian president to do more for Christians, because, as you know, they're still persecuted there. Not much has changed since the Muslim Brotherhood. That didn't happen either, maybe more so with Congress than with the White House.
Well, we'll continue to keep them in our prayers. Gary Lane, thanks for joining us.
무신론자이자 종교를 적으로 여기던 한 사람이 있었습니다. 바로 리 스트로벨인데요. 그러다 자신의 아내가 기독교인이 되자 믿음이 가짜임을 증명하기 위해 무려 2년간 기독교를 파헤치기 시작하지요. 하지만 그 결과는 과연 어떻게 되었을까요? 리 스트로벨의 이야기가 영화로 완성됐습니다. 함께 만나보시죠.
There were so many reasons why I didn't want there to be a God, because I did not want to be held accountable.
Millions read Lee Strobel's The Case for Christ. The best-selling book is now a movie.
I've spent my entire career as a journalist uncovering the truth, until the day my wife presented me with the biggest story of my life.
I'm not going to lose my wife and my kids to something that I can't even reason with.
And what happened next changed me forever.
To see your life put on a screen, not just random things from your life, but those emotional moments of the good, the bad, and the ugly. The conflict that we had after Leslie became a Christian, I was still an atheist, the arguments. To see that relived is difficult for us to watch.
There's a scene where Lee has this big argument with his dad, and that happened on the eve of graduation for him. And when that argument was over, he came over to my house. So I heard all about it. But this is the first time I actually observed it.
How can we even talk about historical evidence for the resurrection?
The Gospels are filled with contradictions.
The empty tomb is based on evidence.
Lee and Leslie Strobel's real life unfolded in the Windy City, Chicago. But production of the film, The Case for Christ, happened here in the Atlanta area, what's often called the Hollywood of the South.
Camera's going to move to the end of the shot.
Our cameras were the only allowed on set. A recreation of the Chicago Tribune newsroom, where Lee, an investigative reporter, began putting faith on trial.
So you want your wife back? Well, hey, guess what? People in hell want ice water. Not everybody gets everything they want. Stop blaming me and the church and God and do your job. Stack up the evidence, follow the facts, and write the story, win or lose.
Actor Mike Vogel plays the role of Lee. He chatted with us between takes and still in his 1970s and 80s wardrobe.
This is me doing Lee Strobel and my best Ron Burgundy. You know, it's been fun. It's been really, and it's great as an actor whenever you get to do a transformation like this because it really helps throw you into the part.
Lee's transformational story really begins the day his wife falls in love with another man, Jesus.
Cough, baby. Cough, baby. She's coughing. She's fine. She's okay. Just breathe. So much. Thank you. I don't know how to thank you. Come here, baby. Come here. Thank you so much. You thank me. I'm a nurse at Mercy Hospital. She's going to be fine now. We're so lucky. Well, it's not luck. It's Jesus. My husband and I were on our way to another restaurant tonight. Someone told me I need to be here.
Leslie became a Christian, and Lee thought his world was ending. She dropped a bomb on him, right? He's this very much radical atheist who had no love for the church, no love for Christianity at all. And his wife comes home and says, I'm a Christian now.
When Leslie told me that she had become a Christian, the first word that went through my mind was divorce. Because I didn't want to be married to a Christian. I was an atheist. I thought that Christianity was based on wishful thinking, on legend, on mythology, on make-believe. And I didn't want her to turn into some holy roller or something that I didn't marry. I married the one Leslie. It wasn't in the deal to change, you know. This was, you know. So I thought, I'm just going to walk out.
But instead of walking out, he launches an investigation.
The crucifixion of Jesus is one of the best attested events in the ancient world. There is no historical evidence of anyone, anywhere, ever surviving a full Roman crucifixion. And, if you will, the final nail in the coffin, at least from the theory, is this.
When the soldiers thrust their spear between Jesus' ribs, do you know what came out? Blood and water, which we now know is a description of pericardial effusion as a result of death by asphyxiation. This is not a condition anyone could fake.
And so to answer your question, yes, it is my medical opinion that Jesus Christ died on that cross.
But beyond medicine and science, it's the heart of Lee's wife that leads him to the answers he needs. She refused to stop praying until her husband found the God she had.
And it really was the positive changes in her character and values that I found winsome and attractive over time. It used to be, you know, in the previous generations, apologetics was about putting somebody up against a wall and machine gunning them with answers. You know, it doesn't work anymore. It's about a story. It's about a relationship. It's about conversation and dialogue and relating to each other.
The love story that's at the heart of this movie is what really drew me to it. I loved the fact that this was a story that was taking a very honest approach to faith, but that the emotional stakes were embedded in a husband and wife who are separated by her belief and ultimately brought back together as he finds a common belief.
This is a love story that raises the hard questions.
If the resurrection of Jesus didn't happen, it's a house of cards.
Without fear of the answers. Ephraim Graham, CBN News, Atlanta.
유럽 국가 중에서도 영성이 가장 약한 국가이자 목회자들의 무덤이라고까지 불리는 곳이 있습니다. 바로 아이슬란드인데요. 인구 30만 명의 이 나라에 제대로 된 교회는 5개가 전부라고 합니다. 하지만 통계는 또 다른데요. 통계에 따르면 대부분의 국민이 기독교인이라고 합니다. 아이슬란드의 상황에 대해 전문가와 자세한 이야기 나눠보겠습니다.
How can a nation that claims 85% of its inhabitants are Christian also be the 6th most atheistic nation in the world today? That sounds like a contradiction in terms.
A lot of it can be traced back to a law that was in the books that basically dictated that a child, when it was born, was on paper Christian by default. So if their parents were registered to the state church, they would automatically be registered at birth to the state church. And so that number, 85%, is quite high. And it's definitely not because people registered for the state church. It's because they were born into it and sort of looked at as Christian by default. And so a lot of nominal sort of Christianity over here.
Well, as a former minister said to you that Iceland is a preacher's graveyard. Those are strong words. Why is it so difficult to spread the gospel there?
It's we think we got it all. It's a beautiful graveyard. It's definitely a beautiful place and a good place to live. But it is just the apathy. Sort of when missions teams have come over here and I've asked for feedback, it's not really hostility or threatenings or anything like that towards the gospel, but rather just apathy. Sort of maybe the relativistic kind of thinking where that works for you and that's great, but I don't need Jesus. And they've rejected Jesus without knowing who he really was and who the scriptures say he was.
So in this culture, what is the best way to win people to Christ? I know that can be a challenge.
Yeah, I mean, if I'm supposed to be an expert on the issue, we're in a sad state because we're going through trial and error right now. So we got a really artistic culture, and we're trying to use the arts for the glory of God and to share the gospel. But we are realizing more and more that the traditional way of evangelizing, going downtown, handing out flyers, we've been doing that for almost 2.5 years. When we realized that we had probably spent a lot of money bringing these groups over here short term, and we look back and I don't think we had a single person come to church or a service because of that effort.
Well, how has your church grown over the past few years using kind of these new techniques and kind of understanding what isn't working and what is working?
We kind of revamped our strategy for evangelizing, mainly focusing on the locals over here to equip them for the work of the ministry, to share the gospel in their daily lives. And it seems everyone in our church that we have right now is because the people have been faithful in their daily lives, telling their friends about the gospel and having open conversations about the doubts. We have a small group that we sort of tell people it's kind of doubt night. You're welcome to come over here and ask questions about the faith. We still have atheists who come regularly to small groups and Sunday services, and they're still not switching teams. I ask them almost every Sunday, are you ready to switch teams now? Are you ready to confess Christ as Lord? And that's just something that God is doing, and we can't really fully explain it. We're definitely not a mega church. So I don't want to project the idea that we're like, a few thousand people over here. We're like, 50 on a Sunday. So it's not a mega church over here, but God is doing a work, and in a country where a lot of churches are not at this number that we are at, it's definitely something that we marvel at, and we hope and pray that God will continue to do his work. And so we're seeing some people come to faith, but we're plowing away, and we're hoping, that our children and our grandchildren will be able to reap some of the seeds that we've sown. And we're going to be faithful no matter what we see with our eyes. We're going to be faithfully plowing the ground, faithfully sharing the gospel and standing on the truths of God while delivering it with grace, as we see that Christ himself did.
세대 차이라는 말에는 문화, 정치, 가치관 등의 차이가 포함되어 있는데요. 이스라엘에도 새로운 변화가 필요하다고 주장하는 이들이 있습니다. 오늘의 마지막 소식입니다.
In their first visit to Israel, these young pastors will get a special look at the country and its history.
We need to represent Israel in a fresh lens, in a new way, and cultivate that heart. And so that's why trips like this are really important.
Eagles Wings founder Robert Stearns believes Israel is too often portrayed as a villain by media, the UN, and movements like BDS, which calls for boycott, divestment, and sanctions against the state.
And too often, in a narrow first-glance look, Israel can be painted as the Goliath and the Palestinians as the David. And so it's really vital to come here and understand the realities on the ground.
Those realities include seeing an Israel beyond the headlines and other noise.
So many people in my generation are like, I don't know what to believe anymore. I'm going to have to see it in order to really believe it. And so to come here, you see the truth. And you connect with people, you talk with people, and you really do find out what's actually going on here.
Some felt that as millennials motivated by social justice, they needed to hear the Jewish side of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict.
taking the journey really of the Jewish people and being able to walk that with them, and then being able to now say, I stand with Israel. After seeing their journey, there's no other side to stand on, and you can't grasp that unless you're here.
Rabbi Penny Dunner, one of America's leading young rabbis, joined this group of evangelical pastors.
I think that they get it, and I think that the more that Jews realize that they have brothers and friends in the evangelical world, and particularly with the emerging generation of millennials, I think the greater the chances for the success of the state of Israel and for the coming of the Messiah.
Many felt it was time to make the trip to Israel.
I would challenge everyone to do whatever it is, whatever sacrifice they have to make, whatever they have to set aside to make this trip because it's life-changing.
For me, it's completely opened up my eyes to God's plan for this land, God's plan for the Jewish people, God's plan for Christians, and this partnership that started to come together it's history in the making.
Chris Mitchell, CBN News, Jerusalem.
오늘 준비한 소식은 여기까지입니다. 저는 다음 주에 다시 찾아오겠습니다. 시청해주신 여러분 고맙습니다.